Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Okay, everyone, how are you going? Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Get a real kick out of being able to connect with you all, and this is now a significant community of property investors, and we're blown away here at Momentum Media, who's the brand behind Smart Property Investment, just in how deep this connectivity is right now. And you might just be listening to me on a train or mowing your lawns or going for a jog or however you choose to engage with podcasts. But just to give you some sense now, the Smart Property Investment Show is listened well over 100,000 times every single month. I think the latest number's around 120,000. So it is a big community, and there's a whole bunch of people who are involved in property investment, most of us trying to make a few bucks out of it and wealth creation. But that is a community that you're part of right now, and please keep delivering all those comments around the podcast and what we're doing. We're always looking to improve it. I'm a pretty big boy. I can take some constructive criticism. So if there's anything you'd like me to do differently, please reach out, get in touch. The email you need is editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You can also leave a review. We like that on whichever podcast channel you're listening to right now. But property investment is something that I've been passionate about for many, many years. As you know, I am an investor myself, and I share my journey investing in property with all of you on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. I'm still investing in property. I still see it as a great asset class, irrespective of a lot of the negativity coming out of COVID-19 conversations now. And recording this just a matter of days after the Treasurer stood up and confirmed after 30 years of positive growth, we are in a recession. That's 2 quarters of negative growth, 7% drop in the June quarter. What does it mean? What are we going to do about it? Does that mean property is an asset class that's on the nose? I don't think so, but I brought someone into the studio who can have a really good chat with me around this. I'm sure you'll enjoy this discussion. Anna Neelagama, she is the Chief Executive Officer of the Real Estate Institute of Australia. That's quite a long title. It was a bit of a tongue twister there for me. Anna, how are you going? You well?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm still getting around that title myself, Phil.
So Chief Executive Officer, CEO of Real Estate Institute of Australia. So we can just call that REIA, is that the right?
REIA, yep, that's
REIA,
the one.
Okay. All right, let's condense it to REIA. This is a relatively new role for you, Anna. You kicked off in August, and I'll ask you a little bit about that in a moment, but for those of our listeners who might not be aware of or familiar with REIA, what do you guys do?
So REIA is the voice for real estate agents here in Canberra. We're a national body, and our main job is to talk to the federal government about policy settings that are good for agents and good for our customers. In the agency profession in Australia, it's around 120,000 jobs, and it underpins a property market worth anywhere from 300 billion to 600 billion, depending on who's saying it, and interfaces with every single aspect of Australian society, whether you're a franchise, in commercial and residential. So it's a big, busy, important job, and it's just as busy now in the post-pandemic times. So that's what we do. We've got a network of institutes across the country in each state with thousands and thousands of agents as members, and around 75% of the entire industry is a member of ours. So I'm excited about the new role and excited to be representing the profession from here in Canberra.
So you're based in Canberra and you're an Australian-based association. Is it a federated model? So every state sort of operates independently and you're an umbrella that connects it all? Is that how it works?
That's correct. Fairly similar to the federal and state governments, actually.
Okay, good. So you're based in Canberra, which means that no doubt you're knocking on doors and banging down, walking the halls, corridors of power there in Canberra. Real estate, as you mentioned, it's essentially the backbone to the nation. Most Australians hold their wealth in real estate. Most of the value of banks' balance sheets is tied up in the mortgages connected with those properties. So everyone in Australia talks about property. It's the topic of conversation at any dinner party. So you're smack bang in the middle there, trying to make sure that our policymakers are representing not only real estate agents who work in the transactional side of real estate, but us as Aussies who are investors in real estate. That's pretty significant. What's the key focus for you now at a policy level?
Look, I think the key focus right now is just helping the industry and helping customers navigate a very challenging and uncertain time for the industry. What you've seen with COVID worldwide is effectively a government-led or policy-driven shutdown of economies, which we've never seen before. So previous recessions have been driven by other factors. This recession has been led by governments shutting down society and the normal way in which we do business with one another. So we've seen this week, obviously, that the economy is contracted by about 7%. So everything we're doing now for our agent members and our customers is about certainty and growth of the industry. And that's looking at things like the extension of the JobKeeper scheme to support our renters, lowering the home builder threshold so more of your customers, more of your listeners can actually access those schemes. Helping more people into the property market by extending schemes like the first home loan deposit scheme and the super saver scheme by the feds. Looking at all of these things to provide customers, wherever they are, first home buyers, investors, homeowners, move forward and make some good decisions and in turn stimulate the economy so we can get out of the recession that was induced by COVID.
Yeah, which I think every Australian is aligned with, is getting the wheels of commerce back into action and money in people's back pockets, which promotes spending and therefore helps us lift us out of a recession. And we need 2 quarters of positive growth, don't we, to get out of recession officially? Is that how it works?
I believe that's the case. I'm not an economist by trade.
Channeling my high school economics. But so it's going to take some time. And I think the Treasurer has been pretty clear that's a bit of a rocky road ahead. But they are projecting that we will come out of the recession in 2021. And obviously some of that's going to be led by historically low interest rates. The RBA has come out pretty much saying, hey, it's going to be pretty low for quite some time, interest rates. So good for property investors. That's how you choose to do that. Now, Anna, what were you doing before this? So you kicked this job off in August. So I'm looking behind you now. It looks like you need to get some books on your shelves. It's that new and you haven't officially moved in. But what's the backstory for you ending up in the seat there now?
Look, my background is in agribusiness. I grew up in an agribusiness and a small business. I studied politics and international relations. I had a history in sort of PR and policy prior. Early on in my career, I worked for Austrade. I worked for a congressman in the States. I worked in a few government agencies in media policy roles. And then I joined an organisation called AgForce, which is the farm lobby in Queensland. Food and rural property is really very much my home. I've spent a lot of time in policy and advocacy around trade and investment, and property and REIA was just a logical next step. I love property. I'm very much like you. I see it as an important part of wealth creation and something that I've got a personal hobby in. But growing up in a small business, working in agribusiness and so long, there are so many intersections with property and investment. When I saw this opportunity at REIA, it seemed too good to be true. So that's how I ended up here. And what we're seeing now in the pandemic in terms of food and agribusiness and property is very much the same. Meat sales actually spiked in the initial part of the pandemic because people were...
If you could find some sausages or beef around, all the hoarders had it, but...
Correct. But what we saw was people really returning to the fundamentals, good at home eating, quality time with family. And we're also seeing that in property. People really returning to the fundamentals, food, shelter, home care, gardening sales have spiked, healthcare sales have spiked. These are all things that customers are placing a very, very high value on at this point in time in the pandemic.
So I've been told that there was well over 100 applicants for this role to lead the Real Estate Institute of Australia, of which you were successful. So obviously a job that a lot of people wanted, which means that no doubt you've got quite a significant path ahead of you. Structurally, I guess you must report into a board at REIA. You're still within that probably first 100 days of your role and you're trying to understand what's going on, what the important stuff is, how you're going to shape your strategy moving forward. What's been the directive from your board about what success means for your role and how you could support real estate agents?
I think there are 2 things. One, our focus is very much on supporting our members and agents through this quite uncertain pandemic time. As you know, in March, there was an extraordinarily change in our circumstances and everyone had to pivot very, very quickly. In Victoria, obviously, the profession is still facing a lot of challenges. So, my primary MO right now is to simply support the industry and our customers where we can through these difficult times. Moving forward, it's really just to work to ensure that the property industry is as well represented and as visible as possible here in Canberra. So we've got a great, vibrant, prosperous property sector with, a better taxation system and, less red tape to contend with from a federal level. And all of that's very long term and it takes a while. But I think, you're clearly very passionate about property and all your listeners are. And it's really just to realise the potential our industry has from a policy perspective here in Canberra.
Well, when we come back for a break, we'll have a chat about how that policy dynamic works in Canberra and some other points as well I want to get into back in a moment.
Whether you're an avid property investor or about to buy your first property, why do it alone when you could partner with Australia's best buyer's agent? Director of Pure Property Investment, Property Investment Professionals of Australia board member and REB Buyer's Agent of the Year, Paul Glossop, can take your portfolio to the next level. Get in touch today to discuss your investment goals. Get one-on-one insight from Paul Glossop, and for the first 100 people, this service is completely free. Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule your consult with Paul Glossop directly.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Anna Neelagama, Real Estate Institute of Australia's new CEO. How are you finding navigating the bureaucracy of Canberra at a federal level, Anna? You're getting access into the relevant ministers and their people to try and shape, cultivate change for the betterment of property investors and also real estate agents?
Oh, look, very, very much so. I mean, I have to say it's all virtual now. There's no walking the halls of Parliament, and you may have seen the past two parliamentary sittings. There were even MPs and senators buzzing in remotely. But REIA's got an excellent long-standing reputation with decision makers. They've had a long history of being very, very influential on public policy. Policymakers from a federal perspective have been very receptive to the work that agents have done since the pandemic has started. So I have to say it's been great, and we've got a high level of engagement with government when we're talking about better policy settings for agents and housings. But bearing in mind, we're nearly 100 years old, so that shouldn't come as a surprise. REIA's been a fundamental part of how property and housing and economic policy has been shaped in this country.
And it's good to get an insight. We're obviously speaking a little bit industry orientated now, but for property investors to actually understand the mechanisms for how policy takes place and the different actors that support the change in those policies. And REIA is obviously trying to do it on the basis of better outcomes for real estate agents and therefore us as investors or consumers. And traditionally, the real estate bodies in Australia, this sort of federated model, you've got some pretty strong voices at state-based level who haven't necessarily always got on or being able to sort of project upwards at a national agenda. How's that dynamic sort of at the moment? Is everyone becoming friends at the state-based level?
Look, that's a great question, and I've got a lot of experience in that dynamic that you're referring to from other sectors. But I think when it comes to something like the pandemic, which has fundamentally changed what we're all doing, it's a bit down tools and uniting against a common enemy. So I've come at a time where collaboration is very, very good and it's all quite high, and all states and all agents across all states are looking to their state governments for certain things. Reductions in stamp duty is the obvious one. You know, the optimum operating conditions for agencies in line with social distancing, you know, stimulus in terms of new housing and construction, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, the state-based chapters or institutes in our instance, they've all got a lot of information to share and a lot of good initiatives to collaborate on and swap some knowledge on in terms of what states have, you know, provided some concessions for the property industry and customers. On the other side of that is that they're all watching very, very closely with what will happen to policies at a state level, like the end of the rental eviction moratorium, which they've actually just introduced in Victoria. So there's a lot of, as I said, collaboration, a lot of swapping notes, and everyone is working together to try and negate a very difficult time for all Australians.
And I think it's a good point in that when things are good and easy and the wind is behind us, some of the conflict that happens, whether it's in real estate or other industries, fades into insignificance when you're up against a common foe, that being COVID-19. So, you know, I trust is a real enabler for the different associations to maybe bury some of those past areas where they might have conflicted into giving a national agenda which is supported. I guess one of the challenges you have, Anna, is that property is very state specific. There's different rules in different states at different times and legislation changes. That the fundamental principles are the same, but the sort of specific red tape around or bureaucracy around property is different. Is there going to be a way in which, and whether this is part of your agenda, to get some sense of commonality of the rules of transacting property nationally? Is that something on the horizon?
Yeah, very much so. But I will tell you a fun fact. I may not have anything on the wall behind me, but the wall to my right, there's the first conference of REIA, which had a slightly different name back then, but it was in 1923. And one of the first items on the agenda is a single national property law. So what you're referring to
100 years later.
Pretty much. What you're referring to is a very, very historical issue. It's a common issue across all sectors, which is sort of a beast of, Australia's federated model. But I'd say two things. Prime Minister Morrison has been running this national cabinet, which is, basically Australia's task force to deal with the pandemic. And through that, he's announced an intent to reform and nationalise a broad range of things to benefit business. One of them is industrial relations. And another is, the broader sort of economic and tax system and how states deal with each other. And that's tasked to a council called the Council on Federal Financial Relations, which is all the state treasurers. And so one of their first projects or initiatives is actually a national occupational licensing system. Initially, that's going to be for tradespeople, but there is consideration that will be put in place for agents. So it's certainly something that's on the agenda. And I mean, as Australians, we would be fools if we didn't use this pandemic to actually get some cut through on some very old and very historical red tape and regulation. And, for agents in particular, we've been working with the Australian Banking Association on digitalising our whole supply chain or chain of transactions and really exploring the premise of actually participating in a digital economy, which is something as a society we've talked about a lot, but the pandemic's only just really started to force our hand in terms of moving to a fully contactless system of transactions. So do I think the opportunities there to solve some of these age-old issues that have been around since 1923? Very much so. And it's something we'll be actively looking to progress.
Okay, well, that's good to hear because as a property investor, and that's the purpose of this discussion, you want, and being reasonably digitally sophisticated, so much of the heavy lifting utility around property transaction can be digitised, and we now have PEXA, which is a good thing. You've got, as you've found through this pandemic, banks now are quite happy with digital signatures and identification of people using the marvels of the internet. So we've shown that when we need to change, we can change. And I've been vocally at a public level reasonably supportive of the government's attitude and approach to the COVID pandemic and how they've been able to move so quickly when they can do, when they need to make changes. So we now have a precedent for the speed at which change can happen should people be sensible about it and work towards a common good. So that happens at the association level. But for myself as a property investor, I'd love some commonality on the rules and the rules of the game to invest in property right across the state, because it's hard to be across absolutely everything. And if I'm investing one day in Queensland, one day in Victoria, it makes sense to get rid of the bureaucracy or streamline the bureaucracy to do that. How do you go about doing that? I guess part of it is having conversations like this and hopefully educating, giving greater awareness to these type of situations. But what are the tactics you're going to engage, Anna, to try and cultivate your 100-year anniversary, I guess, of the association, this national legislation?
Look, it wouldn't be a single rule book. It would be a range of different initiatives across specific areas. National licensing is obviously an automatic focus because the Treasurer has made a commitment to doing that. It's really about knowing what your preferred system is, what is your alternative, what are the benefits are. And for the agency sector, we're very customer driven. So what is the net public benefit for that? Is it administrative? Is it better customer service? Does it grow some inherent value within the market? And what are the building blocks to get in there? And who are the influencers? Is it state-based regulators? Is it Treasurer Frydenberg? Is it the Housing Minister here in Canberra? And taking it to them and having a very, very clear business case for change, which, prior to the pandemic was something that was, as you pointed out, a very slow burn. And now there's a bit more incentive to get things happening. All states and the feds really, really want to get out of this economic situation. They want society to return to the new normal as quickly as possible. So I think they're reasonably receptive to that. But in terms of tactics, obviously forums like this are great, and thanks for having me on. Traditional media, using our member networks and customer networks is something that REIA has been traditionally very, very strong on and utilised very, very well. REIA's got excellent relationships within Treasury and the Reserve Bank and that level of, public policymaker. So it's really combining all of those networks and galvanising them and taking the case to them for change about why it's good for the customer as, agents.
So when we come back, I want to chat about what the best agents are doing right now, Anna, and just also views towards the property market. We'll be back in a moment.
Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Anna Neelagama, CEO of the Real Estate Institute of Australia. 2 months into the job, looks like driving towards change in a very tough and difficult market, but probably one with many opportunities, as we discussed, to promote and influence change at a speedier level. And what should property investors really be expecting from real estate agents in this COVID environment? What are the best agents doing right now?
I mean, this is really my observation as a newcomer into the sector, but for agents, the show must go on. People want to put their property on the market and they want to sell, and they're facilitating that in the best possible way for the best possible outcome for their customers. I mean, agents, like everyone, we're all facing an environment of the great unknown. We don't know what will happen in Victoria. We don't know what will happen with the management of the disease in Australia. There are a range of sort of fiscal measures that have been taken that will have an impact on employment and spending. We don't know when the super withdrawals will end. JobKeeper and JobSeeker have been extended to the end of March next year. What will happen after that date, we don't know. And there's also the question of the deferral of mortgages. So these are all things that are going to have an interface on the economy and the property market, as well as just things like immigration, education, tourism, construction going back to previous levels. These are all considerations that are going through people's mind in terms of where to from here and what impacts it will have on the property market. That being said, pandemics do come to an end, and Australia has managed the response well and has always had a very attractive offering to property investors. And the way we've gone about managing the pandemic and looking after our communities and the type of economic response governments have taken, I think puts us in very, very good stead in terms of investment and, security within the property market.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And this comes back to property as an asset class and what are the reasons why it should be an attractive investment moving forward, therefore whole value and giving a vehicle for Australians to create wealth. Yes, it is a contested market right now. There's not a lot of zero migration into Australia, which has always been a key boon for driving price growth. Transaction levels are down, a lot of stock on market. But this is one thing, if you're new to real estate, you got to get used to, is that markets are always changing, evolving. Not a lot that you can do to influence how they do operate, but what you can take action is how you choose to approach to it and set your investment strategy around it. Is the morale level of real estate agents at the moment pretty high, Anna? They sort of, irrespective of the challenges in front of them, they're a pretty resilient bunch of people, right?
Yeah, I was going to say my observation is that they're a very resilient cohort. I mean, the reality is that everything is quite steady for the agency sector, particularly in those areas that have kind of got on top of COVID. The Western Australian market is very, very strong. You've seen a lot of repatriation back to WA, a lot of fly-in, fly-out workers settle in WA permanently, and that's driven a very strong interest in the sector, both in terms of rentals and purchases. South Australia is quite similar, as is Tasmania. So, I think in general, things are going along as they should be. But everyone is facing some uncertainty come, sort of March next year. A lot of these government support programs finish. And that's far less so for the agents themselves and more so about their clients, what will happen to the renters, the investors, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, that's the type of thing they're seeing and feeling. But I think the fact that the property market has remained steady and good, I think sort of speaks for itself in terms of what your listeners might be thinking and considering.
Yeah, and if you want to sort of tune in on how the markets are actually tracking rather than what you may read or hear or see on some of the media, I had a really good chat for our listeners with Tim Lawless, who heads up research at CoreLogic Asia Pacific, and we did a sort of a bit of around the grounds on the August numbers. I think there's a drop of, by memory, Anna, 3% in Victoria. Canberra was holding firm. To your point, Perth is doing quite well. The Sydney market has dropped by 0.6% or thereabouts, I think the housing market at least. So you need to have some sense, or get some sense around what is actually happening, and don't get caught up or swept up in some of the negative noise which you may see around property, or the particular agenda of some people to try and talk property down. So that's what you can control. Be informed, be educated, be connected. And what are you most enjoying about your job at the moment?
Really, there's great people, and everyone's really interested in, using the sort of terrible situation the world has come into to, revitalise some of the ways we do business in Australia, and look at those kind of quite big fundamental barriers to entry into the marketplace, like stamp duty. So everyone is quite buoyed by the opportunity to put in place some long-term reform. So the people have been wonderful, and I'm a policy nerd. That's my background. That's what I've been trained in. The policy space is absolutely fascinating right now, through what's happening out there in consumer land, right through to what's happening here in Canberra in the lead up to the federal budget, which is this month on the 6th. In terms of reliable, credible, authoritative real estate market facts, I'd just do a little plug to your listeners, Tim, in terms of next week. REIA's got our real estate market facts coming out, which looks at things like the median house price, median unit price, residential vacancy rate, and returns on rental properties. And that's one of Australia's most oldest and credible sources of housing data. So if you're looking to make evidence-based decisions about property, I'd point you towards that, which we call REMF internally. But also this week, we had our housing affordability report put out, which actually had some very good news for renters, showing affordability is the best it's been since 2007. So if you're a property investor, go to the source of the best possible information, which we believe is our own.
Okay, cool. Well, when that's available, I'll make sure you get that over to us, and I'll make sure it's available to everyone. I'm sure we can do a bit of a synopsis on what those things and point you in a direction to try and go and get more of it. And thanks for your time. So I've really enjoyed the chat. It's nice to meet. Don't be a stranger. I know you're relatively new to the job. So let us know what the association is up to, any information which you think is valuable for Australia's property investment community. You're probably a policy nerd, or you said you're a policy nerd. We're sort of largely data nerds as well. So anything we can get our hands on to help shape and make more informed decisions and set the strategies from that is valuable. So if you can send it over, it'd be great.
Yeah, look, thanks for your time, and thanks for the flurry of questions to get me thinking about the future of REIA.
Yeah, well, and for those tuning in, there is nothing pre-scripted with these conversations. So, which is a good thing and a bad thing for my guests on it. It means I put them on the spot a lot, and it's only when you start having a chat with someone that you can actually work out what you really want to have a chat about, where the greatest value is. So, Anna, thanks so much for being so responsive and quick on the mark with how we've had this discussion, because I know you are new to the job and no doubt still finding your feet in many ways. So I look forward to our conversations moving forward.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Nice one. Thank you. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au if you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so the first to know what's happening in property right across the nation. smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. Social media, just Smart Property HQ. That's how you like to get your info. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Whether you're an avid property investor or about to buy your first property, why do it alone when you could partner with Australia's best buyer's agent? Director of Pure Property Investment, Property Investment Professionals of Australia board member and REB Buyer's Agent of the Year, Paul Glossop, can take your portfolio to the next level. Get in touch today to discuss your investment goals. Get one-on-one insight from Paul Glossop. And for the first 100 people, this service is completely free. Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule your consult with Paul Glossop directly.